The Haunting of Willow Creek. Joe and Amber had been living on the outskirts of Willow Creek for weeks, their makeshift camp hidden beneath the thick canopy of trees. Life on the street was rough, and with the biting cold of autumn creeping in, they knew they needed better shelter. That's when Amber mentioned the old house. "It's been abandoned for years," she said, lighting a cigarette. "We could crash there. I mean, it's got walls and a roof better than this." Joe was reluctant at first. He'd heard stories about the house, whispers from other drifters who'd passed through Willow Creek, but desperation often silences doubt. "All right," Joe sighed, "let's go check it out." The house was a towering, decaying Victorian on the far edge of town, just beyond the dying trees that gave Willow Creek its name. Vines choked the siding, windows were broken, and the once grand porch sagged under years of neglect. A single creak of its old door welcomed them inside. It was better than sleeping under tarps, they reasoned. And so, they set up camp inside the sprawling, dust-filled rooms. As they sat on the floor in the fading light, Amber hesitated. "You know about this place, right?" Joe frowned. "Just that it's abandoned." Amber leaned in, her voice lowering to a whisper. "There was a murder here. A woman, years ago, no one knows what happened. Her body was found upstairs, but the killer, he was never caught. They say her ghost still wanders around. People used to hear her screaming at night, crying for help. That's why no one stays here long." Joe scoffed. "Ghost stories. People love to make up stuff to explain why something feels wrong." Amber just shrugged, her eyes wide and uneasy. But it wasn't long before they both realized that this house had something far worse than creaky floorboards and drafty halls. That first night, it started small. Joe had been trying to sleep when he felt a pressure on his chest, like someone sitting on him. His eyes snapped open, but the room was empty. His heart raced, and he rolled over, trying to shake the feeling. But sleep wouldn't come easily. Amber was restless too. She kept hearing what sounded like footsteps upstairs, soft but distinct. "The house is just settling," Joe muttered when she mentioned it, though even he didn't fully believe it. The next day, as they rummaged through the house looking for anything of value, they came across old, rotting furniture, cracked mirrors, and water-damaged walls. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, Amber found something strange, a single, blood-stained shoe. She stared at it, her hands trembling. "This is from the murder, isn't it?" Joe grimaced, but before he could answer, they heard a loud crash downstairs. They both froze. The house was silent for a long moment before another sound followed, a low, dragging noise. "Someone's here," Joe hissed, grabbing a rusted pipe from the corner of the room for protection. They crept downstairs together, every creak of the floorboards beneath them making their skin crawl. But when they reached the bottom, the house was empty. Nothing had fallen. The only thing out of place was the front door, now wide open, though neither of them had touched it. "I locked that door," Joe whispered, his voice cracking with fear. That night was worse. Joe woke again to the feeling of pressure on his chest, but this time, when he opened his eyes, he saw it, a figure standing in the corner of the room. A woman, her hair matted and wet, her dress tattered and stained dark. Her face was obscured by shadow, but her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, locked onto him. He tried to scream, but his voice was gone, trapped in his throat. The figure stepped closer, her breath shallow and raspy, filling the room with a damp chill. And then, just as suddenly, she was gone. Joe sat up, gasping for air, his entire body shaking. Amber was sitting up too, her face pale. Did you see her? Joe nodded, unable to speak. They decided to leave the house the next morning, but by then, it was too late. The house wouldn't let them go. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows cracked without warning, and everywhere they turned, they felt her watching. The walls whispered their names in the dead of night, and the temperature in the house dropped so low they could see their breath. Worst of all was the basement. They'd avoided it until their last night, when Amber, in a state of panic, insisted they go down there, thinking maybe there was anything that could help them escape. The stairs groaned beneath their feet as they descended into the blackness. The air was thick with the smell of mold and rot. At the bottom of the stairs, they found it, a small, dirt-stained room with a single, rusted hook hanging from the ceiling, and beneath it, the outline of a shallow grave. Amber screamed as the room grew cold, and Joe felt a hand ice cold clasp around his wrist, yanking him toward the dirt. They ran, but the house seemed to shift around them, the walls warping, doors leading to nowhere. It wasn't until the first light of dawn crept through the broken windows that they managed to escape, panting and trembling, the front door finally letting them through. They never spoke of Willow Creek again. The house still stands, waiting for its next visitors. But late at night, if you listen closely from the woods, you can still hear her faint cry for help, lost in the wind.